Shalom to everyone. Welcome back to another weekly Torah portion. And before we actually start and talk about some of the details within the Torah portion, I would like to mention and remind the viewers and listeners about the principle of, do we give somebody a fish, or do we teach him to catch a fish so that he can gather more fish himself? When we discuss certain principles within a Torah portion, it's not about always the amount of information or the wow factor related to, oh, I heard something new and therefore it's very exciting. We have to remember that there are certain things within the Torah portion that is not written. And for instance, in this week's Torah portion, we'll find that there are a lot of information provided. And we have to develop and discover this art of asking questions in order to understand why Hashem has given what He has given us in the Torah. Why is it specifically written like this? Why all these details? And I would like to use this format in the teaching tonight to work through the Torah portion and develop this art of asking questions, to discover and uncover some of the details that is written between the lines within the Torah portions. Because we have to remember that as we start this week with Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness, that some of the things that the people, the nation of Israel discovered, they only could discover in the wilderness. We'll find that our own lives, we find ourselves in the wilderness. We find where answers are not readily available, and we have to sometimes read between the lines to discover what Hashem has got in store for us. And this is an art that we have to practice every day in our lives. Why is things happening to me at this moment? Why am I here? Why is this person in touch with me? Why is this person talking to me? Why is this car driving in front of me? There are certain things that places us in a wilderness in order for us to discover something that Hashem wants to tell us. So let's start with just Bamidbar in a nutshell. So Bamidbar means in the desert, in many translations, or in the wilderness. And there's also the name given to the fourth book of the Torah, in English, Numbers, because we'll find that it's in this book it's a lot of numbers. It begins with the census, the counting of the tribes, the Shevatim, and the instructions about the arrangement of the Israelite camp. The Levites are not included in this count, since they are responsible for the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and they have a special status within this nation to do the service of Hashem, and therefore are seen and counted differently. We further discover in this Torah portions that Moses counted all the total of men of draftable age between 20 and 60 years old in Israel, and we get to a very specific number, 603,550. Not 49, not 551, but a very specific number. So So of these 22,273 were firstborn sons. The tribe of Levi, however, was not counted with the other tribes, since they were separated in the service of the Mishkan. So we find that this counting is not the first time that there was a census or a counting of the nation of Israel. There have actually been situations before this. And by using the analysis of what is different and why did God do certain things, I want us to discover two things tonight. Is that who are you and where do you belong? Because these two concepts are certain things that God wanted to reveal to the nation of Israel. Who they were and actually where they belong. So we'll start with the first time that we see in the Torah portions that the nation of Israel were counted, or let's say numbered. And this was the first time was in Egypt when they left, and it's written in Shemot and Exodus 12 verse 37. When they went forth from Egypt and he counted them. And we find and we read in this 37 that the Hebrew word keshesh, ma'ot, elef, about 600,000. There is no specific number. Now remember what we said a few slides back, that there was a specific number, 603,550. But here the Torah portion mention about 600,000 men on foot besides the children. So here it mentions specifically that it is not just a number of 600,000, but there were children and other as well, other who left the nation of who left Egypt with the nation of Israel. So it was about 600,000. So the Torah portion in Shemot is very vague. I wouldn't say vague, but let's say it's not precise with the number that left Egypt. So keep this in mind as we are going to work through the sections where they have been counted. We find the second time they have been counted was in Shemot 30:16, Exodus 30:16, when many of them fell in consequences of having them worship the golden calf. God counted them, Hashem counted them to ascertain the number of those that were left. This time the counting was a bit different. And we see the principle of the half shekel. We encounter it the first time in Shemot 30. As explained previously in Parshah Kitisa, Hashem had Moses take a census in order to raise funds for the construction of the Mishkan and provide atonement for blood shed during battle. This collected money was called a Kesev HaKippurim, atonement money. And that was to be melted down to create 100 Adanim, sockets, that were used in the pillars of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So the half shekel contribution takes the place of blood. And the silver atonement, or the monetary value, the payment of the silver required, was the same as a trespass offering that we would find in Vayikra 5, 14 to 19. So this is the second time that the nation of Israel has been counted, and the Torah portion here are also completely different regarding how it relates the number that has been counted. So all we know and all information that we have received at this moment within the Torah portion is that they were counted. They were counted by means of a half shekel, and we don't really have more information except the fact that it was enough to create 100 Adanim sockets for the pillars in the Mishkan. So in this week's Torah portion, Bamidbar 1 verse 2, Numbers 1 verse 2, we read, and he was about to make his presence dwell, his Shekhinah dwell amongst them, when he commanded them to make a tabernacle. He again took their census, for on the first day of Nisan the tabernacle was erected, as according to Shemot 40 verse 2, and shortly afterwards, on the first day of Iyar, he counted them. So this is the third time that we're encountering the command of a census, or a counting of the nation of Israel. And now we're going to go back, and we are going to ask a few questions in order to discover some underlying information that is written within the Torah, and it is for us to discover what Hashem really wants to reveal. What did he want to reveal in this Torah portion? So let's ask the first question. Why was it important to count the people? Did Hashem not really know how many there were? We know that Hashem knows everything. Nothing is hidden, no secrets in a human's heart are hidden. Everything is open for Hashem. Therefore, the number of each soul within the nation, the number of each fighting men, was already available to Hashem. He knew everything. He knew. He counts the hair on our head. So God knows everything. So why was it important then for Hashem, or as it seemed in the Torah portion, for Hashem to know how many there were? And we know that Hashem knew. So why is it then important for them at that stage? We are reading in a story where Moses are revealing to the nation of Israel, we need to count the fighting men. So why was it important for Moses and for the people in that time to know the numbers? And then why is it then different for us also to do when we read the Torah portion this week? Why is it important for us to know all these details in the numbers of each tribe, exact numbers, and the way that they counted are repeatedly the same wording? It would be just easy to say, and Moses counted the nation of Israel, and this tribe was so much, and that tribe was so much, but it's written in a specific manner. So then we ask ourselves, but what was the difference between what was different, and what was the difference between the three countings that we have discussed? So let's review. What was different in these countings? So the first counting we discussed, when they went forth from Egypt, he counted them. So we know that the Torah portion, or that Torah portion, Shemot, tells us about 600,000 fighting men. It's kashesh, it's about 600. It's not an exact number, but it specifically uses the words besides the children. So we know that God is very sparingly in telling Moses what he needs to write down. Otherwise, we would have had much more information of what happened for 40 years in the wilderness. But the books are 5 books, and there are certain information given to us. So we have to ask ourselves, so what is the point in saying besides the children? And why not say, and the mixed multitude that came with him, or the women and the children, or the wives and the children? It specifically says about the fighting men and then the children, as if to give us an idea that it was not really 600,000, it was really much more than 600,000. Because these children, they grow up into fighting men. They might have been just an age before being able to be counted, so at 19 years old. So the next time it was counted, they were 20, so the numbers would have been different. So we don't actually know the number that's been counted. It's somewhere unknown. And we are not given any details on how the count was done. How did they count them? Did they send people out to every house before they left Egypt? There's no details for us provided in the Torah on how did they get to the count when they left Egypt. The second count, he counted them to ascertain the number. In Shemot 30 verse 16, we find that everyone who is entered into their records from the age of 20 years up shall give a half shekel. So here becomes more specific relating to how was the count done. We know that there was records being kept, and it had to be written in the records from the age 20 years and up. So we assume, and the assumption is that the records that were kept is just numbers. It's not physical family names. It doesn't give us that details. The second thing that we understand is that the counting was related to a with a half shekel, so that half shekel can be used as the adanim, the sockets, in the temple. But with this process of counting or taking a census, there is an atonement value that needs to be provided with this count. So the description of the second count and the reason for the second count and the value of the second count is completely different to the first and to the second time. Here we are not given in the second count any relation to the amount of fighting men or people, but it's related to the amount of half shekels. So we are again sitting in a scenario where we are reading and we are not provided a lot of detail. Now when we read this week's Torah portion, it's completely different, and the approach is completely different, and it's giving us different details. And he says he counted them to ascertain the number, according to Numbers 1 verse 2, and we see this by the clans of its ancestral houses. He commands them that each tribe must present themselves. They must list now not just in the amount in the records, but now it's going to be listing the names, every male, and head by head, meaning that it would be tribe by tribe, person by person. Now imagine to yourself the process that it would take to account, let's just do the 600,000 divided by 12 as an average portion, and clan by clan, head by head. Imagine the process for the people involved and also the people that needs to be counted. We have sophisticated digital systems today to help us with the count, but here Hashem gives us a specific instruction regarding how the count was done here for the nation of Israel. We see the second detail in this is that the names, it's not that God just gives an order and say, okay, bring the tribes before me and bring the heads before me, and then head by head. God gives Moses an instruction. He says, no, you shall present by name, by tribe, head by head. And when numbers are finished with the count, it gives us an exact amount, and it says 603,550. That is a lot of detail. That is a lot of counting. It's not 49, it's not 51. It is exactly 603,550. So we can already see in the three different counts within the period where the nation of Israel were counted, different information is provided. Different reasons are there for the count. So in the first two counts, we find that it's almost like a counting without a face. There is no individuality. There is no personalization with every count. The Torah does not give us details. It doesn't tell us any information about the nation of Israel on the first two counts. It's like the picture shows it's a person without a face. It's just a number. But Hashem comes and tells Moses to write this Torah portion in a very specific manner. And we find that these numbers that are being counted, they have individuality. They actually have a name, not just a number. So imagine in that time when Moses was ahead of the nation of Israel. He was walking in front of them, and we know through the Torah portions that we've read is that he stood from the morning until the evening to listen to the complaints and discussions and things that the nation of Israel wanted to hear, and they wanted to see Moses. And his father-in-law Yitro just said to him, well, it's not a good thing that you're doing, because you are going to it's going to be a hard task for the people as well as for you, and it's just going to be impossible to do this, and you're going to wear them out. So we understand just from that piece that not every person in the nation of Israel had the opportunity to see Moses face to face. It's like us seeing our own president of our country on a screen or on the internet, and we know him by person, and we know a lot of details about him, but we have never met him face to face. But in this third count, the head of the tribes need to join Aaron and Moshe, and they have to then present themselves head by head, one by one in front of them. And these records were written and were saying, this is the son of this, son of the, son of that, and a lot of details. And Moses, for the first time, hears every name of a fighting man within the nation of Israel. But each man had the opportunity to face and to see Moses for the first time. So that's the difference between the three countings. So we're going to take this and we're going to break it down into smaller pieces and try to understand the message and why Hashem has put it so differently within the Torah portions. So let's ask first, why was the count so important? Now, the commentary, Rashi makes a comment. And in the Midrash and in the Chumash, the commentary says, because they were dear to him, he counts them every now and then. When they come from Egypt, he counted them. And we know that he's been counted the second time with a half shekel, and then the third time. And he likens the counting of Israel with a person that has got valuables, that looks after their valuables. It's not a case where a person counts his money to understand how rich he was. But he inspects it like a diamond collector. He has got certain diamonds, and these diamonds are precious. He's the only one in the world that has got this certain diamond collections. And he would take these diamonds out from time to time, and he would inspect them, and he would count the diamonds, and he would value them. And this is what Rashi wants to tell us about the fundamental reason for the counting of the nation of Israel, is because this nation had a value to Hashem far above that we normally just think. So we see the importance of this count is demonstrated when Hashem gives a specific instruction on the layout of the tabernacle, that the Levites are to camp around the tabernacle, and then in a very specific order, the nation of Israel needs to camp around the Levites, and then the Ger, those who dwelt among Israel, will also then be on the outside or among them. But we see that God places Judah and Issachar and Zebulun next to each other, and Benjamin and Manasseh and Ephraim, and Gad and Shimon and Reuben. He places them in a specific order because, according to what we have read, that Jacob, when he blessed his sons, he saw certain values, he saw the characters of each son, and he put a blessing upon them, and so we see the count was important in the nation of Israel, specifically here with an exact detail, because God is valuing the nation of Israel as they are presenting before them. And we see something very unique, is that each one has got a name. Each tribe is unique according to how Jacob has also seen his son, and he's seen the individuality and diversity of, and they are separated and organized according to their diversity. And even the way that when they break up camp and they have to march out, God gives them Hashem gives them a specific manner of marching forth, and where should the tabernacle, the Mishkan, be situated among the tribes. So we see something very important, a concept here, that Hashem dwells within the diversity of his people. Not a people, his people. Remember on the previous, when he says to Moshe, Moshe, you go to Pharaoh, to Paro, and you tell him, let Yisrael, my firstborn son, go. So he has made a proclamation that this is his people. And it's not just one nation, that God from the time told Abraham that his descendants will dwell as slaves within Egypt. And at the right time, and the time when it's fulfilled, will leave Egypt. And then he gives Yitzhak 2 sons, and he gives Yaakov 12 sons, 12 tribes, each with a different name, each with a different character. So diverse that the sons, the 10 sons, would sell Yosef into Mitzrayim. And we see such a diversity among these 12 tribes, and the diversity of these 12 tribes make them a one nation, and Hashem dwells within the diversity of his people. It's important to Hashem because he identifies the tribes by name. Each person that has been counted that day realized that they belong to a certain tribe, and that tribe belonged to a certain nation. So in that day, the people gained identity, not just an Israelite, but I'm an Ephraimite. I'm from the tribe of Yehuda, of tribe of Dan or Binyamin. And we see that there was communities established within a larger community called Israel. And we find that this individuals from each tribe are presented before Moshe, before a man that speaks to Hashem face to face, in such a way that when he speaks to Hashem, his face glows with a radiant glow, and they cannot look upon his face. They present himself in front of this man. What an honor. If you think to yourself, if we had an opportunity to meet the president of our country, how would we act? How would we dress? How would we speak? It would be such an honor for ourselves to present ourselves just in front of the president. And here the nation will present himself before Moshe, called by his name, responsible as the hand of God, and in leading the Israel out of Mitzrayim. And we find that there is an individuality within each community. So within the 12 tribes, in the tribe of Benjamin, there are different individualities within the tribe as well. Hashem dwells within the diversity of his people. That's what the Torah portion tells us today. That Hashem is the creator of diversity among his people. We see that Every man shall encamp by his own standard with the signs of their father's house. Each tribe had a banner. Now each standard was to have a colored clothing hanging on it, the color of being unlike the color of another. The color of each standard corresponds to that of the stone fixed into the breastplate of the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest. And by this method, everyone would recognize his tribe. And this is a description that Rashi gives in the Midrash. But Rabbi Abraham Ezra commented and saying there were signs on each of the four main standards. So there were different opinions. Were there 12 banners or were there 4 banners? But the whole point that I want to make here is that God specifically mentions in the Torah portion that you put a label to this person, you make him an individual. He has got an individual character because this is how I created him. And if you look at the various pictures within each 12 tribes, we know that there are a lot of midrashes about what these pictures were. But the point is they had an individuality. And there was quite a famous Jewish person that recognized the value of individuality. His name is Albert Einstein. That says we are part of the whole which we call the universe. But it is an optical illusion of our mind that we think that we are separate. The separateness is like a prison for us. We create our own prison when we think that we are separate. Our job is to widen the circle of our compassion so we feel connected with all people and all situations. Hashem dwells within the diversity of his nation. Albert Einstein, it's an optical illusion of our mind if we think that we are separate from this nation that God has created. Think about your own community. When you sit within a community and we speak about and we midrash about certain Torah principles, and people come with a complete diverse opinion, what is our reaction, what is our emotions, and what do we feel? And it is quite human because each one wants to be an individual. Each one wants to know that he belongs, and each one wants to know that his contribution to the whole is meaningful. But if we don't see this in the light of Hashem's message to us, this is why there is split within communities. That's why people are not able to sit around in a community and talk about differences. But the problem is when a difference appears, then people disappear with those differences. And Baruch Hashem, that my own community that I've been involved in has been a testimony of God's wonderful diversity in action. That we have so many times discussions, heated debates, absolutely And every Shabbat and every time that we got together, it was different. And sometimes we're getting upset, and sometimes we don't like this opinion. But every Shabbat we came together and we were together. Sometimes we get to a point where we just feel we just had enough, and we just want to be now separate. And Albert Einstein tells us this is an optical illusion if we think that we can be separate. And I don't have to mention the fact that the whole idea, the whole analogy of taking a fire coal and putting it one side, it cools down, but when you are part of the community, then the fire burns brightly together. And within this Torah portion, God provides so much detail, so much individuality. And we've read it for so many times, year after year, and it's numbers after numbers, and we're just trying to get through the Torah portion. But I wanted to tell and remind you today that God has written this Torah portion in a specific manner so that you can answer this question: who are you? You are precious. You are an individual created in the image of the Almighty Creator. And you belong to His nation, called by His name. The fact that you were born is a testimony that God wanted you to be in this life. And He wants to remind you that as we see this puzzle being put together, sometimes we are just a nose, sometimes we're just an eye, and we should not fool ourselves to think that we can be separate, because only in the diversity do we create His nation, we create the full picture, we create God's plan. And that's why He gave us each a life, part of this community, part of this diversity. And Hashem would ask you tonight, and I would ask you tonight, that this life as a diamond before Him is so precious. Shouldn't we make it very meaningful? And we make it meaningful by being a community, while being separate, while being individual, while having our own personalities. We have to be reminded that is how Hashem has created us, and therefore He wanted us to contribute to the community. And He says, you are part of my plan. You belong in my plan, in my picture, and therefore your life have meaning. Shabbat Shalom.